Hi, I'm Dr. Shannon Ferguson, and this is Move It or Lose It. And today we're going to be talking about stretching the hip. The hip is a joint that goes in three different directions: front, side, and back. And so it's important that your stretching should go front, side, and back. Especially with glutes, there's a lot of muscles in the glute area. So you want to make sure that you are getting all aspects of the glute, so it shouldn't just be one stretch or one angle. Just a refresher on stretching tips in general. When you're stretching, you should never feel pain. It shouldn't be agony just to hold it. If you've reached that point, back off a little bit. Stretching should feel like pleasant discomfort and not straight up pain. When you're stretching, it's really important to hold it for long enough. Anything under 30 seconds, you are pretty much just reflexively relaxing the hip, which isn't a waste of time, but you're not really creating any long-term change. Between 30 seconds and a minute in general, you're starting to create changes in the muscle tissue. A minute plus, you're starting to create changes in fascia. Most people who have chronic pain issues, fascia is involved. So it's just a good idea to blanketly hold stretches for a minute. To start, we're going to do the hip flexor and quad stretch. So I've got my ankle in my hand behind me. I'm contracting my glutes and keeping my knees somewhat together while tilting my pelvis posteriorly. So kind of a hip thrust to make sure that that stretch shifts from the center of the quads to the front of the hip. I'm holding everything for about a minute, but I'm counting in my head, so it might not quite be accurate. So this is another way to stretch the hip flexors and the quads. I'm switching halfway through and showing you from the side. So this is the kneeling version. So my knee is right underneath my torso and I'm still contracting the glute, making sure that the pelvis is tilted posteriorly, so kind of a hip thrust, and I feel it in the front of my hip rather than the center of my quad. And now we're going to be switching to a tensor fascia latae stretch. So that is right between the hip bone and the pelvis. So it's a little bit of a lateral stretch and it's hard to get. And at the very end, I'm going to show you a different way of doing it on the ground. But this is the standing way. So I've got the leg of the side that I'm stretching crossed over the other ankle and then bending over to the side. So I feel this in my lats and in the hip. It also helps to pop that hip out to the side that you're stretching just to get a little bit of extra range of motion in there. And now we're going to be switching to the seated glute stretches. So the glutes are a lot of muscles, so doing it just one angle is only going to get part of the musculature. So I am putting my ankle over top of the knee and then sinking my chest in toward my ankle and knee. It doesn't have to be a big range of motion to get the stretch, and it shouldn't go to pain. And pressing on the knee can have negative impacts on the knee. So if you have knee problems, try and avoid that. So this stretch gets the outermost part of the glute muscles. So you should feel it in the outside of the hip. And now we're switching to the middle part of the glute muscle. So I've got my mid shin on top of my knee, and then I'm sinking my chest in toward my knee. And there's Finn. So with each of these stretches, I can get a bigger range of motion in terms of how far I can sink down, and that's normal. That's not that each part of my glute is more or less flexible, that's just how the joints move. So the next one, I'm going to be able to sink even closer toward my knee. And now the third glute stretch. So I've got knee on top of knee and then sinking the chest in toward your knees. So this does the innermost part of the glute muscle, so close in toward the sacrum. You can also do these stretches while lying on the ground. So instead of bringing your chest toward your knees, you are bringing your knees in towards your chest. Remember to repeat this on the other side. I regretted the whole day after I recorded this that I had only done one side because I felt totally off kilter. So remember to rewind and go back and do it on the other side. And that's a minute. So this is the alternate way to do the TFL stretch, so that side of the hip. So you want to take your arm out toward one side, anchoring your shoulder blades on the ground, and then bring your knee towards the opposite side until you feel a stretch in that hip. The angle of the knee really matters. So for me, getting my knee away from my chest, so farther down my body, I felt this stretch much more in my hip rather than in my lower back. So make sure that you experiment and wiggle around a bit until you feel the stretch. Thank you for watching my video on stretching the hip. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you like this video, please subscribe to get more updates on stretching and pain-free living.